Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, how are institutions in the state of Pennsylvania dealing with the recession? We've heard from a variety of them in the past several weeks. It's public education's turn. Following these words, hold it, but before you go, looking into the crystal ball, the big stories likely to occur in Pennsylvania politics and government, that and more, now you can go, following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, joining me is Peter Garland. He is the Executive Vice Chancellor of the state system of higher education. Is Pennsylvania before or at the end of that? The Pennsylvania state system of higher
Pennsylvania,
education.
so people know what state we're located in.
We know what state we are in here. But thanks, Peter, as always, for coming in. Look, we've done some shows. We've looked at healthcare. We've looked at transport. We've looked at the environment. We've tried to get a look at how a bunch of institutions are dealing with a recession. Higher education, both public and private, reeling. Is that a bad word? Reeling from the recession, or?
I think many of us are still trying to figure out exactly what the total effect is going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly families are hurting in terms of both their real income and resources, and then perceived in terms of what they think the future is going to hold. Certainly students are in a crunch. One of the things that I think we'll start seeing even more is many students at our universities, as well as others, work at home on weekends and also when they're in the campus community. And as retail continues to shrink and some of the other service economy, a great concern about those students having the margin of dollars they need to be able to continue to afford higher education.
Tell me this, if my impression is right or wrong about this. Typically during recessions when a lot of job opportunities, actually enrollment, particularly I don't know, I know that goes up in the private sector. I'm not sure about the public sector. I'm not sure about the private sector. What do you know about that?
The greatest effect is typically in community colleges and those that are really in just-in-time job training areas. But it does affect most of public higher education in terms of the number of people who look at it. Plus, there's the cost factor. Individuals that might look at a relatively more expensive public or private institution will look increasingly at the system and our good universities to enroll in them, looking at the value that we offer.
Yeah. Now, what in general, I mean, I want to, in the next segment, I want to get into the tuition situation and the cost of education report that you know more about than probably anybody else I could have on this program. But before I do that, let's talk a little bit about budgets. You all turned back some money to the governor, made a request. You turned back some money. How is that affecting what you all do now? Specifically in terms of how you're attempting to make up for the budget cut.
Sure. I think, first of all, our universities and university presidents, their administrators, and the faculty deserve great credit for the fact that they're well-managed universities that are able to take on a situation like this and do it in such a way that I believe for the average student, they're not going to see any difference. Clearly, at universities or any organizations, there were positions that had not yet been filled. There were programs and services to be initiated that are going to be pushed off a bit. Different things that we can get through the year. It's certainly not going to be easy. There's going to be some things we would have wanted to do but aren't going to do.
Yeah, it's sort of surprising that when we talk to folks, regardless of where they're situated in the economy, they're all kind of doing similar things. They're not filling positions. They may have some programs they would have launched. They've decided not to launch. They're arguing to protect their core missions. Maybe some of the subsidiary things you'd like to do. Is that what you're essentially talking about here?
That's what we're doing. The other thing that universities are doing is what do you need to do in terms of balancing your budget for the current year, but then how to be more strategic, looking the next 2 or 3 years that we know are going to be tough years in terms of appropriations, in terms of families' ability to pay tuition. So how do you think really creatively about not only maintaining your core mission, but even doing things perhaps better and different to manage with fewer dollars?
All right, we're going to run to a break. I want to talk about this cost of higher education in Pennsylvania, and it gets into some of the specifics about where we are, and maybe we can chat about where you think all of that goes. We'll be back. Higher education, how it's doing with a recession, after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. I'm talking with Peter Garland. He's with the State System of Higher Education. We're chatting about how the recession is hurting or obviously hindering some of the ability of the state system and other colleges and universities to deliver services, but as we said, not core services. I want to point that out. Hey, before we go on, I want to talk about this study, but there was another consideration here that I wanted to ask you about, and that has to do with the fact that higher education itself has been considered a huge an important factor in terms of job growth. I mean, you're a huge employer in many parts in Pennsylvania. I mean, many places in 130 or so schools. You're all education and health care, hospitals and colleges. They're very important in terms of the economy of the state, aren't they?
Absolutely. They make, in many communities, and you look at the total state budget, they're among the largest employers in the state, and those who have the ability actually to generate the ideas and education necessary to create a workforce and potential job growth that is really one of the great assets we have in this state.
Yeah, and as they weaken, then particularly in rural Pennsylvania, which we hear an awful lot about with doctors leaving and education institutions that can't provide. I mean, we also know, Peter, that from studies that have been done, that where you live matters. So you want a regional university. Some people don't want to go from, Clinton County, Pennsylvania, let's say, to someplace in Massachusetts. Lock Haven, for example, would, and we know that matters, that the region where you live and the location is often as important as the cost. And we don't often talk about that.
Right, and that for a community, I mean, it is absolutely the case that where you have educational enterprises in your community, colleges, universities, branch campuses, off-campus centers, that makes a critical difference in terms of the quality of life in that community and the ability to keep and retain as well as attract new business opportunities.
That's both public and private, because we have all these small schools, whether there be some of the small state system schools, but we have some pretty big state system schools like IUP, Indiana University, out in basically rural Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about this study, the cost of higher education. If I got this right, they looked at 10 states. Pennsylvania didn't fare so well, even though the state system has kept its increases below inflation. Give us a quick synopsis of that.
Pennsylvania, when you do national studies of higher education, Pennsylvania is always one of those anomalies in that we don't organize our higher education system, public system, the way many other states do. It is absolutely the case that Penn State and to a lesser extent Pitt and Temple, our major public research universities, are among the highest cost public universities in the country. And then when you look at a state-by-state comparison, that's averaged with the state system's tuition rates on that one. If you looked at the system alone, we're below the national average in terms of what we charge for tuition and the total cost of attendance. We've had for the past several years the lowest tuition growth of any system of public universities in the country. And so it's something of a concern, I think, for Pennsylvania generally, that it looks at higher education, that we are relatively a very high-cost state in terms of tuitions. But I think we can take some heart in the fact that with good stewardship, the system has kept those tuitions low.
And before you go, one follow-up question. How about the aid to supplement that? I mean, is that Pennsylvania has been known as a pretty good state for student aid, correct?
It's been very strong in terms of student aid, one of the largest programs in the country, but still the net cost to students, and this is something students and parents understand, the net cost after all aid is still relatively higher in this state, particularly at the public research universities, than anywhere else in the country.
All right, hey, as always, thanks for the update. All right, get your I don't have one in front of me. Get your crystal ball out. The big stories for Pennsylvania. Two of Pennsylvania's top analysts are here to help us out. What's coming up? We'll see you in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Get your crystal ball out. I don't have one in front of me. The big stories likely to occur in Pennsylvania politics and government. Joining me, as often is the case, is Peter DeCoursey. He is the bureau chief with Capitolwire.com, and Fred Anton. He's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Peter, I want to start with you. Arlen Specter's role in the Congress for much of what President-elect Obama wants to do. Big or little story?
Huge story next year. You need 60 votes to move anything in the Senate. There are 58 Democrats. There are 3 moderate Republicans, Arlen Specter and the 2 senators from Maine, Susan Collins and Olympia Snowe.
Right.
You need 2 of those 3. Those 3 senators have mostly a veto on the Obama administration's main stuff. Without them, it can't move forward. So Arlen is going to be courted heavily by this White House. Arlen is going to be very much a big deal in getting to amend things from this White House. He is a key vote there. There is another big vote called card check, which is about how you unionize both the national business groups and
it's a huge issue, isn't it?
Yeah, both the national business groups and the AFL-CIO call it their biggest vote in 50 years.
Yeah, Fred, you're obviously a businessman. How big is card check?
Card check is huge, and as a matter of fact, local manufacturers associations have already convened meetings in various parts of the state to brief their members and to get opposition ginned up on card check. Card check as an issue has exploded.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. I think
people have become much
and it's
more
unified the Republican Party. The Fred Antons and the people who run against Arlen Specter in the primaries, the hardcore conservatives, both care tremendously.
Card check. Explain it.
Very simply. Right now, if you want to unionize, you got to go around and get a majority of your workers, of the workers at a place, to sign a petition. What amounts to a petition, a card. Then, once you have enough of those, you get a secret ballot. What card check would do is eliminate step 2. It would get rid of the secret ballot, and as soon as you get a majority of workers to sign, you got to.
All right, Fred. There's something I want to move on. Got to move on. But judicial appointments, typically Specter for Bush years, major player, district, federal judges, somewhat also important in Third Circuit. Casey will now move center stage, have more appointments. Will Specter still have a big role in judicial appointments?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the tradition within the United States Senate was something called a blue slip.
Yeah.
Is if one of the senators from a state object to the nominee, it's at least delayed. Now, Specter also has a very good relationship with Pat Leahy. Specter cooperated with Pat Leahy, chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And also, Specter has for years had implemented in Pennsylvania when the Republicans had 2 senators, something called the Javits Rule.
Yeah.
And the Javits Rule said that the minority party and the non-president's party was entitled to one out of 3 or 1 out of 4.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the year. I want to move on, but this is so fascinating.
There's another big Specter role Fred was talking about while we were off. Tell us about the star role he expects to play in the Eric Holder confirmation.
Yes, Eric Holder,
Attorney General nominee of Barack Obama.
Attorney General nominee who was very, very involved in getting a pardon through in the Clinton administration for a financier by the name of Rich. And the details are very controversial. Rich was a fugitive from justice. And now bear this in mind, remember this. Arlen Specter is the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. Think back to the role Arlen Specter played in cross-examining Anita Hill. Arlen Specter will be center stage in the cross-examination of Eric Holder. That's going to be on television, Terry.
You got it. So wait a minute. Arlen Specter, this is huge, right?
Everywhere. It's going to be the Arlen show for a year.
The Arlen show.
And Arlen will be ready to do his job. I can guarantee that, Terry.
All right, come on. Issue number 2. I was going to do you first. The budget. Huge issue. Balance it. Taxes, maybe.
Absolutely. It's going to be Joe Scarnati, the Republican Senate President pro tem of the Pennsylvania Senate, has said in straight, simple terms, giving a hostage to fortune no previous leader has ever done in my history here over the last 30 years, has said no tax hike. He's even ruled out things that you could argue whether they were a tax hike or not, like changing the way that out-of-state businesses report and making them pay higher taxes so that in-state businesses could pay lower taxes.
So-called combined reporting.
Right, exactly. He said that's no good. And you have Ed Rendell, who says he doesn't want to, he says, I'd like to avoid a general tax increase, but in fact has proposed at least 2 to 3 tax increases every year he's been governor.
Even in a non-recession year.
Even in non-recession years. And so you have, and of course we're going to have about $2 billion. We're going to be about $2 billion in deficit toward next year's budget. Because remember, corrections, welfare, these other things, they go up every year.
Yeah. All right, so we got to go to break. Hold that thought. We're way over time. All right, we only got 2. Specter budget. Back in a moment. More Crystal Ball.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
All right, welcome back to the Crystal Ball Show. Okay, issue number 3, bonus gate. The attorney...
The budget. I want to learn more.
That's right. Fred gets the budget. Go ahead.
The focus on the state legislators giving back the 2.8 increase is such a misfocus by the press. Now, believe me, there is a lot that should be done both in the health care and the pension area. If legislators and state workers are overcompensated, it's in not contributing to the costs of their health care and the inflated pensions that they're receiving without participating.
So you're saying there's too much emphasis on that 2.8% increase and not enough emphasis. All right, I'm moving on here.
Does contribute to their...
All right, I'm moving on. We're moving on. Okay, Peter, bonus gate. On this program, the Attorney General has said there will be additional indictments. He didn't say, obviously, who.
That's the whole thing. There's going to be a perception, fair or unfair, that if there are no Republicans indicted in the next rounds, that Tom Corbett only looked at Democrats, and specifically because he waited to even subpoena anything from the other caucuses besides the House Democrats until later, that he let them tidy their records. So... Plus, if he does indict Republicans, and the question is what's going to happen, what are some of the Eastern Republicans, who are his most likely targets, going to do to him in exchange when he runs for governor? So that's a big story that's going to play out this year.
Tom Corbett has been extremely cautious in indicting anyone. He's indicted only people where he's had overwhelming evidence for witness. He has not indicted Bill DeWeese, even though he has a witness who was working for Bill DeWeese, who has implied that Bill DeWeese was well aware of it. Tom Corbett is very, very cautious. I do not believe Tom Corbett will indict any Republicans unless he has overwhelming evidence and he can convict them.
All right, let's go to issue number 4. Pennsylvania and the new administration. Fred Anton, Bob Casey, close personal friend of President-elect Obama. Ed Rendell, not a personal friend, but pulled out all stops. Obama won Pennsylvania by, 11 percentage points. Is Pennsylvania going to have a little edge up, let me say, in the new administration?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Senator Specter's ranking minority position on the Appropriations Committee isn't going to hurt any either. And we've got a overwhelming majority of Democratic congressmen now in our delegation. I think it's 13 to 6?
12 to 7, I think.
I thought it was 13.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
That's all right.
But yes, we're going to be in a very favored position in the
All right, issue number 5 and final issue of Peter DeCoursey, dependency, state governments on the Obama administration.
There is hardly a state in America, Terry, that can balance its current year budget, much less next year's budget, with the other structural problems they have as welfare and other costs go up, without the federal government. Right now, Ed Rendell's plan to fill in this year's hole, this current year's hole, depends on $450 million forthcoming from the federal government. Everything one hears and talks to from members of Congress and the Senate is that seems to be a founded expectation. But right now, there are 50 governors looking to Washington to bail them out.
All right, we've got about a minute left. I want to do something just in terms of the politics of the state. This year, Fred Anton, we will see the beginnings of 2 huge elections. The race to replace Ed Rendell and, of course, Arlen Specter's re-election. This year, very, very important year for both Democrats and Republicans in this state and for Arlen Specter. Yes or no?
Yes, but do not forget, we have 6 statewide judicial races, a Supreme Court race, 3 Superior Court races, and 2 Commonwealth Court races. Don't forget that Supreme Court race is for the balance of the power between Democrats and Republicans.
We have 20 seconds. Go
ahead.
But
here's the fascinating thing. I spent 3 hours at Fred's fancy event at the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association in Manhattan this Saturday. I could not get anybody to talk to me about the Superior Court race. They want to talk about governor, they want to talk about Senate, and they didn't care about the Supreme Court.
But we obviously agree that these court elections are very important.
They're important.
And to your credit, you've written a lot about this.
Even the fancy-dancy people at Fred's wouldn't talk about it.
All right, you get the last word. All right, we're out of here. We'll see you next week for another edition, and as always, stay well.